For more on this story, we joined via Skype by journalist and commentator Dr. Mustafa Fetouri. Well, he's a Libyan native and he's now based in Paris, in France. Dr. Fetouri, very good evening to you. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to the Globe.
Pleasure.
Now, the war in Libya, as we've seen, has been going on for years now. So why all of a sudden are we seeing this growing interest in the Libyan conflict from the West?
Well, the recent growing interest has much to do with the latest movement by Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, who deployed forces, Turkish forces on the ground in Libya, starting 2 weeks ago. And we already know for a fact that much of these forces are actually mercenaries and jihadists, if you like, brought up from northern Syria, where Turkey is in control of much of that area. That's one reason. The other reason is the fact that Mr. Erdogan and his support for the government national accord in Tripoli actually caught Europe, if you like, by surprise. The Europeans have been unable to do much about Libya since they participated in its destruction in 2011 under the United Nations resolutions guide that authorized the use of force. And when Mr. Erdogan came up and blackmailed the government in Tripoli for signing a security agreement with his government, he pledged his support for that signature. And that's what happened. And suddenly the Europeans had to face the reality that the mistake they made in 2011 is being compounded again by unstable, to a certain extent, leader in their southern flank. And that's Mr. Erdogan. That's one of the reasons why Libya became very important again in the headline. The other reason probably is that Europeans are realizing now that when Mr. Erdogan transfers so many jihadists and suspected terrorists to Libya, that means he brought them to the southern shores of Europe. And we have to remember that Libya is only less than 500 kilometers away from the shores of the southern shores of European Union countries, especially Italy. And that's a very serious threat.
Now, Greece says it now feels excluded in these talks. Why should they be included? What is their interest in this particular matter? I mean, it beats me. It beats me, Dr. Fetouri.
Well, we have to remember the 11 countries that are present or going to be present tomorrow in the Berlin conference are actually there for their own interests, which are conflicting most of the time, and they are different. Even though they converge in one thing, and that's national oil of Libya, plus the geographic location of the country. The other thing we have to remember, economically at least, is the fact that Libya, after 9 years of war, civil war, and that's ignited actually by the NATO intervention in 2011, will need, once it settles down and the conflict is ending, will need huge amounts of investment for reconstruction and rebuilding. And each of these countries, particularly the third, they have a history of dealing with Libya in infrastructure projects worth billions of dollars, and they would like to keep that for themselves. The same goes for Russia, the same goes for every other country. Plus the fact that the main interest that is always there is the national oil. The oil production in Libya, we know, for example, that Libya is has the second largest reserve in Africa, and now it pumps about 1.3 billion barrels a day. That could increase within 5 years to 2.5 million barrels a day. That's a huge amount of money. And it's also a huge amount relatively close by, for the Europeans, I mean, source of energy.
Dr. Fetouri, I'm sure you will agree with me that the level of interest, particularly from the international community and particularly from the Western countries on Libya and on the Libyan conflict is reminiscent of the, the great scramble for Africa. And incidentally, the very same meeting on the scramble of Africa was held in Berlin. So the role of foreign states in this conflict has come into sharp focus in recent weeks, with Turkey passing a controversial law to deploy troops to help the GNA forces in Tripoli. And I mean, what really is the interest of these foreign nations?
Well, as I mentioned before, and the interests are kind of national interest by each country, and we have to look at that from that perspective. But I like the way you put it. This is part of the scramble for African resources and the African continent itself. We know from figures and growth sustainability, Africa is emerging as the future of the whole world, whether it's in its natural resources or fast areas, and potential for fun energy, electricity production, and this kind of thing. So I would expect probably in the next 2 decades or so, Africa will be the #1 destination for foreign direct investment. However, most of the Western countries, especially France, with its long history in Africa, would prefer to have access to the African potential natural resources, whether now or in the future, on terms in their favor. They do not like to see the African nations challenging them, whether on rates of exchange, whether on exploitation of natural resources, whether African 100% African projects, like, for example, the building up of the United States of Africa, as Gaddafi was dreaming. And one of the topics that come up here, which is of interest and really challenged the audience, especially the French, was the idea that Gaddafi was working on years ago, whereby he wanted to establish an African currency that's applicable across the entire African country. We have seen some little developments after he was killed, of course, in October 2011. We have seen some little development in this, whereby Western African countries are adopting, as of this month, January 2020, the ECO instead of the franc CFA as a medium of exchange for those countries. And that is a very big step for these countries if they can sustain it. So as long as Africa is not in a position to actually negotiate with the superpowers in terms of economic terms and equal footing, it will be quite a problem for the continent. But I am sure the Africans, whether in North Africa, South Africa, East, West, will be able to develop a common framework and a common reference, a frame of reference, if you like, in dealing with the outside world, especially the former colonial powers like France and the UK and so on.
Interestingly, you just referenced the capacity of negotiating with these superpowers. And I think it's very critical that we analyze with extreme caution the role that each and every one of these superpowers will play in the Libyan conflict. Now, Libya is demanding that Qatar and Tunisia be part of these talks. Why do they need these two countries here? And what is the role of Russian President Vladimir Putin in these talks?
Well, I can see the relevance of Tunisia taking part in the Berlin conference tomorrow. First of all, we have to remember that Tunisia is adjacent neighbor, very close neighbor of Libya, and we share so much with the Tunisians. We have social relations, inter-tribal relations. Many families are split between the two countries. So it makes sense to have a Tunisian role, the Tunisian to play a role in the reconciliation process and settling down Libya. But I cannot see any role for Qatar, which is thousands of miles away in the Gulf region. And of course, we have to remember the government of national accord, which is requesting that Qatar should be present in the Berlin conference tomorrow, actually does not represent the entire of Libya. That's one thing. The second thing, the majority of Libyans do not like to see any Qatari role being played in this. And the third thing, reason we don't like Qatar is the fact that Qatar, along with France, were the leading forces behind the destruction of our country back in 2011. And the Qataris provided arms, finances, and other logistical supplies to the rebels in 2011, and they held NATO sustainably until they destroyed the country and killed our leader, Muammar Gaddafi, at the time. So any role played by the Qataris will always be viewed with suspicion, to say the least. But we also know that Qataris are still supporting certain fundamentalist and extremist elements inside Libya, including probably elements of Daesh, transported by Mr. Trump to Libya, and most likely financed by the Qataris himself.
And the fact that, Syrian forces are being deployed to back the government, and Egypt seeking international mobilization against a Turkish military intervention in Libya is quite a worrisome narrative. But Dr. Fetouri, thank you so much for your time and your analysis. Much appreciated. That was journalist and commentator Dr. Mustafa Fetouri joining us live via Skype from Paris in France.